our structure of today is pretty simple. We're going to cover certain areas of gaming and esports. Chris and Eayl are going to give us their background and their perceptions of gaming. We're going to then go into the business side of things. We'll go into culture and marketing before we cover the future of gaming, especially in light of COVID-19. And then finally, how you can get more involved in the industry, whether as a gamer or an organization, before we close off with 10 minutes of Q&A. So before I hand over, let me introduce our two guests that are sitting up and down of me, or both up or both down, I'm not too sure. So first up, Chris Smith, founder and director at Big eSports. Big eSports are a PR marketing, including influencer marketing and management agency that specializes in esports and gaming. They have worked with clients such as Fox Sports, Gemba, JB Hi-Fi, NVIDIA, and more. Now, Chris can be found in the Big eSports podcast, and he has a YouTube channel where he profiles some of the biggest names globally in the industry to knowledge share and educate audiences. Also, Eayl Machlis, co-founder of Thunder Insurance. Thunder Insurance are an entity that focuses on the millennial market with a core interest in gaming. Since 2017, Thunder have grown into the leader in cyber and gaming insurance sectors. They have created unique products to specifically service this audience and use their expert knowledge to work with clients to protect their interests within the gaming industry. And good morning, fellas.
Hey.
Morning.
All right. Morning. So maybe let's start with, if you could share a little bit about you, like how your background in gaming and how this has impacted your career. Chris, if I could get you first up to start, and then I'll hand over to you, Eayl.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So if you were to say run or attend a large esports event, I've been there in basically every single capacity across my career in the gaming and esports industry. It's been just over a decade thus far, and I've done things such as played in top level in 3 different first-person shooter games, one of which was semi-professional. I was a commentator for a long period of time. I managed one of Australia's first professional players back in about 2011, 2012 time, a StarCraft 2 player who's now a commentator and a worldwide celebrity in that region. I ran a $30,000 Counter-Strike tournament back in 2010. I've done 6 years combined in PR and marketing for 2 different companies, one Taiwanese, one US, both PC component manufacturing companies, one of which I was their first marketing employee. For the US one, I was their first physical employee, full stop, they're based out of Silicon Valley. Ended up becoming a journalist for a year and a half while having a bit of time out of the industry to study social work, got headhunted back into the industry, and here I am today. And a lot of that for me was discovering over that period of time of where do I want to work in the industry. Every time I did one job, it was like, yeah, this is where I want to be. I want to be the best player. I want to be the best commentator. I want to be the global head of PR and marketing, et cetera, et cetera. But I've realized after that journey of 8 to 10 years that I really wanted to work on the industry. So right now, what I've got a great passion for and what we're doing here with myself and my staff at Business and Games is how do we bring new ideas and new money into the industry? For a lot of it in the past, it's been how do we onboard new companies into esports? Like Dan was saying before, we worked with Fox Sports back in about 2017 time on an esports entry strategy for them across multiple different verticals. Have worked with other clients like Gemba with some of their traditional sports clients and helping them to understand how to get into the market. And because of the change of coronavirus with sports going online, we've got a couple of announcements we'll be making soon too. For us, working with influencers as well is working with the wider gaming industry, not just esports. And for as a business, it's a great way to make revenue. There's a lot of supply and there's a lot of demand for influencers, but also it makes sense that if a company is going to have a bit of a softer landing or a softer entry into the gaming market, influencers is a point of understanding for many people. If they're a brand like Coca-Cola, it's very likely they work with celebrity influencers. So it's very easy for them to understand the 1 degree of separation from a celebrity influencer to a gaming influencer, especially if they're both on Instagram, to then start to softly push them more and more into the gaming market. And after that, hey, they might want to buy an esports team or sponsor a tournament.
Thank you, Chris. And Eayl, share with us, how did you find your calling in the gaming industry?
I just wanted to say thank you for all the participants that are on this webinar. Especially, I know times are very, very tough at the moment. So I personally appreciate, as I'm sure Chris does and Dan as well, the fact you've taken your time out of your day to come and join us. So thank you. Also, I hope your families are well during this crazy, unprecedented period as well. So I wanted to say that from the outset. So a little bit about myself, and I guess, you know, in regards to our journey. So I've had numerous years' experience as a banking and finance executive in some very, very large companies. And I guess, you know, I'm 43 years of age now, so reaching the age of around 40, had a bit of an epiphany in regards to the fact that with my knowledge and expertise, and together with my co-founder, Paul Cowley, who's probably one of the best technical people I've come across in my career, a very, very experienced insurance professional himself. We had decided to concentrate on a niche that has been fairly either underinsured or uninsured, even to a strong degree, even to this day. And using our knowledge, really, as we started to research the gaming industry, and eSports being one component of gaming, but we looked at things like software developers, IT consultants, cyber experts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We saw there was a massive gap in the industry. And it's something that was only really serviced, I would say, at best, at an ad hoc level, and very openly speaking, probably without the correct level of expertise to be able to ensure these types of risks and these emerging risks as well, like we're seeing, for example, in eSports, correctly. So thankfully, you know, using good people like Chris and the rest of the gaming community, as we've developed a very strong affinity towards the gaming and the eSports community, both here in Australia and also overseas, then we use that knowledge to build insurance products. We've built 2 insurance products from scratch. The first one being Thunder Electronic Device Insurance, which is available online through our website, which gives gamers an opportunity to insure their electronic devices outside of home and contents. And the reason why that was important is because typically those items are actually quite expensive to insure, strange but true. So we managed to strip out a lot of the expensive elements of the risk and go direct to consumer and providing a market-leading product, which starts all the way from only $50. And so being able to then, as an insurtech aspect to our business, being able to provide, God forbid, the savings back to the consumer, as opposed to the insurer. And the second product that we've developed as well is the corporate eSports travel product as well. So eSports teams come directly to us to insure themselves for travel. As you can appreciate, that's not happening at the moment, of course. But prior, of course, to COVID-19, we had some of the top eSports teams in the countries come to us to insure them correctly, because there were, once again, gaps in regards to their activities versus how the traditional insurance market was insuring them. So our markets are very varied within gaming. Also, we do a lot of risks outside of gaming too, that have inadvertently come out to us as well, as we've got a very successful panel of insurers.
Yeah, we'll come back to some of those products as well towards the end, especially in regards to risk mitigation and some of the things for the future, because I think they're really relevant, and I believe it'll be really relevant for the audience as well to hear about that.
Sure.
Right now, like, you're in a really good place right now to talk about that. Chris, I have a question for you, and Eayl, please chip in as well. This is a super basic one. How would you describe gaming to the layman? How would you describe it? Like, for somebody like me who pretty much has almost been in freeze since I got rid of my PlayStation 2 and Lord of the Rings PlayStation game, things like that. Yep. How would you describe what it is now as a beast?
Sure. So often, you know, people come to us and, you know, by the nature of our company name, Big Esports, and say, hey, Chris, I want to get into esports. And usually what they want to do is they want to get into gaming. And under that, they want to get into Gen Z and millennials. And the interface or the language or the way to speak to them is through gaming. So to explain what the difference between the two are, is kind of like the difference between sport and just a leisure activity. So if you're kicking a footy with your mates down at the beach, you probably shouldn't be now, but if you were in the past, that's not a sport. that's more of a leisure activity. You're having just a bit of fun. The same way that if you're playing, Need for Speed Underground on your PlayStation 2 and jamming out to the tracks on there, if you're playing Candy Crush on your mobile, Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch, that's not esports. That's just gaming. It's the casual play. It's fun. It's exciting. And primarily or generally, it's single player. Whereas if you're like me in the past, I played a lot of volleyball. If you're playing Wednesday night mixed casual volleyball, that is a sport, because you're playing with other team members. My team, we had a jersey that we got made up that we all paid, $20, $30 each to make one. We paid a $5 entry fee per game. There was a ladder. We were a team of 6 versus another team of 6, and we're trying to win at all times on the court. And first place prize is nothing. It's a little trophy or something like that. But still, it's a sport. The same way that in gaming, if you are playing it with mates, you're playing against other people in a competition, even if it's free to enter, even if you win no prize pool at the end, that's when it becomes esports. That's when it's the competitive play, the competitive nature of the game. The lines do get a little bit blurry sometimes about what is esports and what's gaming. Sometimes, esports is gaming, but gaming isn't esports. And I don't want to add too much confusion in there, but those are the general lines that you can kind of follow. And, some other blurriness might be, hey, if I'm trying to be a professional football player and I'm doing squats in the gym to be able to, jump higher and kick a football further, am I participating in sport at this particular time? You'd say, yeah, you probably are.
But like that's a really good definition. You've skipped ahead there, and I was going to ask what the difference is, because I'm super confused. I get super confused. Yeah, in regards to like actual gaming, like we're about the same age as well, so we would be like going back to game. And I know, Chris, you're like super into it as well. I wasn't going to mention your tattoo, but I will, about your leg tattoo, which you can share at another time if you like. Your Battlefield 2 tattoo. For you, like booting up a system now, I go to EB Games, I buy a game, I bring it home. There's nothing in the box. What like? how do you wrap your head around that?
You didn't get ripped off. I know that's tongue in cheek. Fascinating. I mean, that we can talk to the cows come home. In regards to the research and the buying behaviours. Regarding, for example, purchases around EB Games versus, engines like Origin and things like that, in terms of digital downloads. So that's the reason why you've got an empty box there. So it's legitimate. They should have sold you the empty box, because essentially it's just packaging with what you would have received, of course, being a code. So it's a digital download of the game. And that will certainly continue in the future. I know that with the PS5, has been slowly starting to be released in terms of its information. The specs have already been released to market, I should say, the specifications. Just yesterday, they released the controller in terms of what that's going to look like, which looks similar to the PS4, but in my opinion, a lot cooler. The Xbox still hasn't... I know they've actually released pictures off the top of my head. They have done that. So, and funnily enough, they're actually still... both systems will be obviously you're still using CD-ROM technology. So I guess the phenomenon that you're seeing, that you were alluding to, in regards to going to EB Games, that's not going to go away in the immediate future, I would say, because it certainly serves a market, especially probably similar to myself, even though I do a lot more downloads, Generation X's, baby boomers who buy games and who gift games for family members and so on and so forth. So
and can I ask, from a business perspective, how do you treat each side differently in terms of gaming and esports, from your perspective, in how you service and the questions that you and your view as a business to each side, without getting too product specific?
Yes, a really, really good question. So within esports, and in regards to, I guess, the risks associated to esports, if you want me to start covering that at all?
Not just in regards to like your approach as a business when you're talking to different markets, or you have a type of customer, like do you treat them the same? Because they are very different from what Chris was saying. One's more competition. I imagine the risk element of it would be a little bit differently. Is there any other kind of considerations you have?
Yeah, so the nature of, I guess, you could say in regards to esports, which, well, here in the Australian market, it's very much an emerging market. So
Yeah,
probably not as structured, as maybe Chris will attest to as well. This is in regards to esports, not gaming now. So the nature of how we identify the risks within esports is probably a little bit different than in regards to gaming, because it's actually quite tailored in regards to the position that particular esports team, and also how that team is made up, will dictate that the level of risk that's associated to that. So there's a lot of grassroots teams versus teams that are backed by venture capitalists, for example, in esports here in Australia. In gaming, on the flip side of that, so in
yeah,
gaming, the systems are a lot more formalized, and they have to be, and the processors are a lot more formalized as well. So the identification of the risks is probably a lot more evident, a lot more clearer in that regard. Some similarities, though, in between what you'll find between gaming and esports is that, especially software development here in Australia, will be done by either the individuals themselves who are building the game, who are developing, so they're bootstrapping the game, all the way through to angel investment, and depending on the game, and depending on the name of that publisher, all the way through to venture capitalists as well. One of the questions I can see here is that, are there any venture capitalist firms funding games and gaming technology? Not here in Australia, but in the States, there are actually specific venture capital firms that all they do is invest in gaming and esports. That's what they're primarily do. That's their whole premise.
Do you have names of any of those? Yeah.
I forward that to you because literally there's one note and just the name escapes me at the moment.
Probably probably Bitcraft
on,
would be one of the main ones in esports.
Bitcraft,
Yep.
awesome.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the chat as well.
Bitcraft,
and I'll find
awesome.
gaming as well, which is all. So the one thing I would say, what's really fascinating then on that basis is that, which I never, I guess maybe the baby boomers and the Generation Xers would never think of, as we were probably the last generation to come into technology, first and foremost, is the fact that it's really fascinating to see that gaming is treated in a very similar vein to like a standard hedge fund, for example. Who would invest in various entities to obviously get returns. So, and that will only continue to evolve as gaming continues to be the mainstay, as it's now surpassed film in terms of GDP and all other forms of entertainment. That will only continue into infinity. That's not going to change. You'll never ever see film and other forms of entertainment overtake gaming.
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump in there because you've created a great segue for me to jump across to Chris.
You're right.
What do you believe, based just sort of touching on what Eayl said, what do you believe the tipping point has been to actually get gaming into the mainstream or esports? Because I kind of feel like esports is really starting to bubble to the surface, especially with things like freemium, like Fortnite, for example, and what you're seeing with the World Health Organization and Whopper meals now. Having a team, Burger King, having a team basically endorse a Whopper and things like that. So what for you is the tipping point? Is it a thing? Is it a person, a team?
I think one of the things here would be Fortnite. I think would be like the great equalizer when it comes to bringing gaming to the general public. And in some of my content that I talked about previously, I talked about my girlfriend who works in the lighting electrical industry.
Yeah.
And there were some kids running around the store, and the kids didn't say like what I did. I was born in 91. So when I was a kid, it was let's run around and play cops and robbers and pretend to shoot at each other. For them, it was let's play Fortnite, and they pretended to shoot at each other. And I think that, that and personalities leading the charge there like Ninja and such have been massive. I think if you look at what Ninja achieved, he had a sponsorship from Uber Eats. He had a line of Bonds undies. He has a headband that's for sale right now in Walmart. And also he was the entertainment at Times Square in New York at New Year, at 2019 to 2020, I believe it was. Or was it 18 to 19? I think it was 18 to 19. I have to fact check that. But, there's one entertainment at Times Square in New York, and it was him. He was the entertainment. Granted, it was raining, which is unfortunate. But, he played on stream with Drake, and he had 660 660,000 concurrent viewers watching him when he was on that stream with Drake. So literally 660,000 people watching him at any one time,
That's
and that was him
insane.
playing on a $5,000 computer out of literally his bedroom. So how does that compare to what others do? I think a lot of it too is that companies are now being forced to pay attention, to take note. We've been doing a little bit of work with KPMG to help them and their clients understand how to make sense of the influencer market, because a lot of the time it is you can't invest in what you don't understand. And if you're used to traditional sports and you were born in the 70s or the 60s and you grew up watching traditional sports, well, when you then come into that position of power, when you're in your 40s, your 50s, you're a director of marketing at Commonwealth Bank, or you're working for Rio Tinto or someone like that, you're likely to invest in what your passions were. There's a very common thing you hear a lot of the time where a company will sponsor a sports team because the CEO likes it. And you think, nah, that can never happen. I can tell you it does, because there's definitely, I'm not going to mention who they are, but there's one company I know where the CEO really damn well loves this team, and you could bet they sponsor that team. And every time they launch a new store, these guys have physical locations, that team is there appearing at the store, and he's fanboying over them more than the people in the audience are all the time. And that happens too. But now you're seeing, people who've been around in esports. I'd probably say that my generation is the last generation of some people being non-gamers. Now it's just so regular that the same way that you don't identify as a car driver because it's just expected that most people know how to drive a car in Australia, Gen Z and onwards don't identify as a gamer because they're all expected that they've played a bit of Minecraft or Fortnite and such. But now you're seeing people in my, around my kind of generation, and I'm turning 30 soon, and, people within my generation are up into the 30s and 40s. They're starting to get into those positions of power where they can control the budgets and make the decisions themselves as well. So, in the past, we met with an ASX listed company in the top 100 and getting a lot of pushback from their marketing staff. There was 3 marketing staff in the room, and 2 were saying, yeah, look, we already advertise in magazines, we already do Facebook advertising. Like, what's the point of advertising with an influencer? And I'm like, guys, you don't get it. I don't read magazines and I don't pay attention to Facebook ads, and I'm barely on Facebook and Gen Zs are even worse for that operation on Facebook. And then they had this one marketing guy who didn't talk, and he was like the undercover agent that spoke up, and he was like, guys, respectfully sitting on their side of the table, he was like, you're wrong. He's like, I watch 40 hours of streams per week. I've been following Counter-Strike for 4 years. I've deactivated my Facebook account 3 years ago. You're not reaching me whatsoever. So this isn't even just a retargeting market. These are people that you're not even talking to, that don't even know who you are anymore, that you need to reach out to them because they're completely separate. If you think about the typecast of a gamer, a lot of the time they're consuming all of their content on YouTube, they're consuming all of their content on Twitch, on social media. They don't have a TV plugged into an antenna, they don't have a Foxtel subscription, and they don't watch a lot of live sports necessarily anymore as well. So, and they don't read magazines, they don't read newspapers, they're consuming everything online. So I'm in that category, for example. So if you're advertising on Channel 10, you're also advertising in the newspaper, and you're advertising on radio and on billboards, I see 0 of those because I work at home at the moment, but in the past I work at home, so I'm not seeing billboards. B, I don't read newspapers anymore. C, I don't have a TV plugged into an antenna. So you're not reaching me. And obviously I don't listen to the radio because I don't commute. And when I walk the dog, I listen to podcasts. So I'm not consuming any of those 4 pieces of your very standard pillars of media that you would advertise with in the past.
Chris, sometimes though it's the tail wagging the dog, not the other way around in regards to that. I just for everybody on the line, I found the Ninja headband in Walmart and I've posted it in the chat. So if you really, if you want to take your first step into gaming, it's $20 US. I don't trust it will come across. Trump's supposed to probably put a big embargo on things leaving the country, but you can make your own one. You've got plenty of time, so you can just wrap up a hanky and put a Red Bull logo on it. Touching on what Chris was saying, Eayl, how have you seen, especially things like Fortnite itself? It took me a while to get my head around this whole freemium model. I know it's already been put in place with mobile gaming, but how do you see things like Fortnite impact the gaming industry as a whole? Like going to EB Games, buying the game. Now it's almost been inverted to some degree. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a smart question, mate. Very smart question. So what's really fascinating is the fact that because of the advent of the speed of technological advancement that we're seeing in the market, what used to be you'd buy a Mario Kart cartridge for your Nintendo and, you know, all that other type of stuff. And of course, back then there was no opportunity to buy different skins or, you know, different levels or different maps, whatever the case may be. You know, the investment in the original game is just that. And, you know, that's where the buck stopped. Of course, because of the internet, because of platforms which also even enable participants these days, as in just general gamers, to even contribute to the enhancement of gameplay on titles, which actually is what some of our clients are involved with as we speak, in terms of we're looking after their insurance affairs, is the fact that quite smartly, I think, then you're finding it's actually better for these publishers, you know, like Riot, for example, you know, et cetera, who as you know, allowing the general consumer to play the game in inverted commas, a very, very big inverted commas, for free. And but of course, if you want to really excel in the game, or if you want to get that full enjoyment out of the game, it's not uncommon, very common, I should say, that you know, either the younger generation, or even calling a spade, even all the way through to Generation X's and above, you know, are spending, well, the reason I'm laughing and I say this tongue in cheek, there was a recent article which I published, sorry, let me phrase that, which I had reposted, I should say, to be really precise. That was an ex-NBA player, Kendall Perkins, was having a bit of a whinge that his children had spent, and I'm glad you're sitting down for this, $16,500 US on Fortnite. And the reason for that being is because A, if you're an ex-NBA player, you can afford it, so that's okay. But B, because of the ease of just taking, you know, the children's taking the parents' credit card and then just going ahead and spending freely on all these skins.
That's mental, because I guess that's a massive differentiation, because from a console perspective, I guess there's always a ceiling. You're only going to ever buy Mario Kart 1, Mario Kart 2, X. I suppose with something like Fortnite, there is that, like, you can just keep buying. And I suppose that comes back to something that we picked up on in one of our earlier conversations, Chris, when Fortnite just basically rebooted. So they just started again and created this whole new market for all these new components. Would that be the case?
Yeah, and what you're saying here is it's like how most companies operate these days. Most games have gone to a bi-weekly update model, where instead of, you know, releasing a new title every year, say like some games still do, like Call of Duty, they'll do smaller updates every fortnight, every couple of weeks, and that allows the game to, you know, maintain its freshness and to keep interesting. But every now and then, yeah, like you said, they do reinvent it a little bit. You know, Fortnite put a black hole in the sky, sucked the game into it, spat it back out, and they called it Chapter 2 to try to, you know, keep things fresh, exciting, and interesting for fans.
I've got a question here from Zach, which kind of leads into one of my next questions. Maybe both of you could give an answer to this. This is from Zach. And Zach was asking, do you believe different industries and market verticals will need to bring their product services to the forefront of esports? And I think that's pretty good. Well, that's a really interesting question, especially in the current climate. What are your thoughts on that? I'll start with you, Chris, and then go up to you, Eayl.
Sure.
Yeah, one way to interpret that question, I would say, is are your products suitable for the market you're trying to advertise to? So obviously, logo slapping never works. So if you're thinking about, okay, I really want to reach Gen Z, they're who I want to reach. So I want to advertise through platforms like TikTok, and I want to advertise through influencers and potentially with esports as well. If you create a gas guzzling V8 car as your main line that you're trying to sell, and you're trying to slap the esports logo on that, the consumers aren't going to resonate well with that. If you've got a website that's really old and clunky, and you're a primarily retail store and you're trying to get into Eayl, that's not a good thing. I think Facebook is a great case study here. They tried to get into esports through Facebook gaming, through streaming too early when their stream was not ready, and it really hurt them as a result of that. They bought the rights to a tournament. The viewership dropped by about 70% when it moved from Twitch to Facebook because the features weren't there. When you're on Twitch, you don't need an account to watch. You need an account on Facebook. On Twitch, you could broadcast or you could watch it at 1080p. On Facebook, it was limited to a 720p resolution. On Twitch, you could watch it at 60 hertz or 45 frame rate. FPS frame rate, which is so much more smoother, where Facebook was only at 30. Twitch, you can hide the chat. Facebook, you couldn't, et cetera, et cetera. So while the intentions were there, and while it was awesome to have, I don't know how much money they paid for it because they never released it, but while it was great to get that extra money and a new company come into the industry to provide some competition for Twitch, ultimately it wasn't a great case scenario because the product and the service just simply wasn't there. It wasn't something that people wanted to use. The same way that if you're going to be getting into the market and let's say you're a retail store, like many are trying to do a bit more Eayl, not just because of coronavirus, but also because of that's where the market's going to. If you've got a slow, clunky, old website, there's no point you advertising into the esports market until your website's better. One of the best success stories in Australia of a tech selling website is called pckcasegear.com, all one word. And that's where I bought this Rode microphone stand from. They don't pay me, but hey, they might after this. And for them, myself and my friends always went to that website over every other one because it just looked so much better. It was really simple. You could understand all of the breakdowns of all of the tech products. And us as little nerds at 15 years old would always go there and go, oh man, what's the latest graphics card that's launched? Let's go look at it on their website. But we would always go to PC Case Gear because their website was leaps and bounds ahead of any other one whatsoever. And now that we're older and we're buying products, like I said, we're going to places like PC Case Gear. Now the other companies have gotten on board with that. ple.com.au, who I do a lot of work with, just did a massive refresh to the website, which looks fantastic now. But, other companies still, they don't have websites that are anywhere near as good. So yes, while they have products and services that are applicable to their market, they're not delivering it in the right way. So just make sure to ask yourself those questions if you're coming into the market. Is your product or service applicable, and is what's backing it making sense? I mean, another example is I've done some content about chess, and a lot of the advertising that happens in that space is trading companies, because people who are, standardized into the chess market and they're players and they're high level, they need to make really fast split-second decisions that have a massive impact on the gameplay that happens at any one period of time, which is fantastic for trading companies. And they use it as a recruiting service a lot of the time because they'd love to have a chess grandmaster on board because they can keep very calm, cool, and collected under pressure and make these high pressure, high quality decisions in a really short amount of time frame with limited amount of data available to them.
Great. I think we can all see there, like if you're going to appeal to this market, you really have to understand them, because people like Chris are a great representation of this cohort, this audience that have a really technical understanding and really appreciate organizations demonstrating authenticity. Eayl, from your perspective, what's the appetite of organizations to actually be involved in this sector?
In esports, was that the question? Sorry.
Well, yeah, esports or gaming or like, what's the appetite of organizations to be involved?
Well, it's really fascinating, of course, because I think the one thing that's really, really important to raise is also, as Chris will attest to, is that there's a whole lot of micro segmentation that needs to be really thoroughly understood around gaming, esports being a subset of gaming, and then the makeup of that audience. So you'll find, of course, esports primarily at this point in time, very male dominated, very Generation Y, Generation Z. Yes, there is an element of Generation X's like ourselves. PC gamers primarily, or first and foremost, they will have consoles, but they'll recognize themselves as being PC gamers. The PC gamers are only about 15% of the market worldwide, as opposed to 85% of, with mobile and console. So by that sheer virtue, there's some really fascinating aspects that a brand would have to understand the intricacies. And you touched on such a beautiful word, authenticity. For example, if, and I don't think it's as easy as, let's say, for example, a Suncorp or a QBE or a Coca-Cola just to simply wander into the venue and just assume that everyone will embrace them. I don't think any brand deserves that right, to be honest. So without actually having that authenticity and really understanding the real mechanisms as to what that makes that audience tick, I think that a lot of your general brands will find it difficult. But to answer Zach's question here, Do you believe that different industries and market verticals will need to bring in their products and services? At the moment, I'd still very much say within Australia, it's very much within its infancy. There's still a long way to go in the Australian market for various reasons. We've even seen, much bigger brands than ours, such as St. George Bank, as Chris would know as well, who had entered or tiptoed, I would say is the best way of putting it, into the esports market. I've also seen brands like Hyundai through IEM have entered the esports market and so on and so forth. We're seeing that, of course, the worldwide market is certainly developing quite quickly because of there's quite a few various aspects as to why we're still very much in our infancy. One of them being, of course, just NBN, and I won't even touch on that in this.
No, we're slowly. I'm just going to interrupt you there, and this is a question that I'm really interested in, and this is to Chris, and thank you for sharing, Eayl. We've spoken about organisations wanting to be involved, and we've touched on, and I really appreciate it's only an hour, so we've tried to skim across, and there's a lot of opportunity to go deeper offline. So I'm going to share everybody's links so the audience can get in touch and ask more questions. But something that's of interest to me, especially this new market, switched on people that are actually creating content. We touched on influencers, and I've listened to some of your content, and you've spoken about people that are thinking outside the box. And whenever I think about some of the points that you raised, Chris, in regards to just normal people that are switched on, that are playing games, and the way they make a living is through donations. We look at NGOs now that are living under NDIS, for example, and they're now having to reframe and shift their thinking into being an actual organization, a proper business, a commercial business, and actually generate their own money. How are such influencers thinking outside the box to generate revenue? Can you give us some examples of people and what they're doing?
It's hard to say. I mean, just before this, I had a call with the charity that I'm trying to work with to raise around 300K for coronavirus research. So I've been talking to some influencers about that, about raising capital online. And, a lot of them are saying that it's hard right now because, their reliance on donations, like you said, for a primary part of their income. And that comes through ongoing subscriptions, through Patreon, or simply just through direct donations of, I just pay this guy $5 because I like to watch him and want to keep him in a job. But, they're saying right now that it's hard to raise any money. They don't think that their viewers have anything to give. A lot of them are seeing, 50% or larger drop in their donations or their subscriptions or resubscriptions of people as well.
Yeah.
So it is hard. And the same thing with ad revenue. eSports, which is a global eSports news website that's owned by an Australian company called Gamers Group, and also GamePer, which is a European gaming publication. They're seeing a 50% plus increase in traffic and time spent on site, but a 20 to 40% drop in ad revenue. So I think a lot of people right now, yep.
I was just going to say tactically, like people like Ninja, people, what the people that are sitting there, they're gaming, they're Twitch stream, they're playing a game, and they're still generating cash whilst they're focused on one thing. What are some of the tactics that they're doing to get people to engage with them? Because I think that's the biggest opportunity that I've noticed.
Yeah, the real tactic right now is buy the dip, like investing, which is doubling down in your content. So, I create a lot of content on LinkedIn, and what I'm seeing right now is I'm seeing it. If I continue to post the same amount of times per day on LinkedIn that I have in the past, which I did in the past week or so, I'm seeing a massive drop in my engagement as a whole. But that's not because LinkedIn has less people. I believe it's because LinkedIn has so many more people creating so much more content. There's so much more noise now. So a lot of these influencers, what they're needing to do is understand that, hey, my viewers are home. They want something to do. They want to be engaged. I need to be streaming more than ever before. I need to be creating more engaging clips, posting on social media more than ever before. Because let's say you are like Gamers Group and you're seeing a 50% increase now in time on site. Let's say you go from 100 viewers to 150. After all of this coronavirus stuff is over, maybe out of those 50 extra, maybe 20 will stick around because they've gone, well, throughout this time, you've earned a new fan. I've read so much awesome content on here and I want to stick around. So while you were at 100 and went up to 150 after all of this and everyone's back to work, maybe you've retained a certain percentage of those people and you're sitting now at 120. So then you can use that when the dollars are turned back on from the ad revenue, you can use that to your advantage because you've grown, you've got more fans and you can monetize them through various ways. There are brands that are spending more money now. One of my friends runs an influencer agency, and since the coronavirus has kind of shut down things around the world, he signed another $1 million with various brands. But still, it's very hard to say. It's very unsure because, you know, what happens if shipping stops? I ordered a thing from Singapore for the camera that's plugged in here, and it's taken 4 weeks to get to me, for example. So what happens when, you know, these kind of shipping lines shut down? No one really knows at the moment. So people are being quite conservative, but definitely what everybody's doing is just make more content.
Gary Vaynerchuk way of operating. Well, we've got about 12 minutes left, so there's a couple of more points that I want to cover before we just close up and share links, etc. Eayl, in light of COVID, I think that was another good segue. Thank you, Chris, for putting that on a plate for me. Where do you see the future industry growth and focus? Maybe both of you could give us just a quick summary of where you see the future of esports and gaming, especially in light of where we're at now.
So it's really interesting. Unfortunately, it looks like every indication that there's a bit of a long haul element.
Don't say that. I'm optimistic.
And also, more importantly, of course, when you look at the long-term effects, Australia and the global economies aren't going to recover for years. You know, when you talk about unemployment reaching 20-30% plus, as some countries have already experienced, that's also one of the big issues with esports dollars. Sorry, let me phrase that. Not in influencer dollars is what I'm referring to, not esports. Whereas Chris will attest to, a lot of the people that are viewing because we've got no choice, because we're stuck indoors, are the people that have realistically lost their jobs as well. So that's been directly correlated from an income standpoint. What I believe will happen, and certainly we've been privy to with some of the markets worldwide, is that companies will have no choice but to start being a lot more innovative in regards to the manner in which they communicate with their clients. So, for example, we have a strategic alliance with a company that is just unbelievable, and they do third-party advertising in gaming. But big difference, real-time third-party advertising in gaming. So what that means theoretically, that if you want to, play Grand Theft Auto, and you burst into one of the shops, and one of the shops are Domino's, and you want your large pepperoni delivered, you can actually do that. You can get a real large pepperoni delivered to your house without actually having ever to leave the game or affect gameplay. That's also got implications for us, positive implications for us at Thunder. Yeah. Imagine getting car insurance through a game, And so I think that, through the process of gamification, once again, depending on the long-term effects that we're seeing because of COVID, I would like to think that the more innovative, progressive companies are starting to table these types of ideas, because Chris is 100% right in regards to, I remember having screaming matches with executives in insurance companies to say, if you really believe that spending $10 million in TV advertising campaign, I said, why don't you give me $5 million? I'll go to the closest drain and I'll put that down the drain, because you're just not going to get any benefit from that.
Again, that's a tail wagging dog, and that's like a whole 2-hour conversation minimum.
Absolutely. So
Chris, how about you?
Things that people see as a result of what we're currently going through.
That's really good. Thank you so much for that. How about yourself, Chris? Where do you see the future?
It's hard to say. I don't think I ever want to be known as a futurist, because you can never predict the future. But I think, are you asking in regards to, say, the future of gaming and esports as a whole, or commercialization in the space, or as a whole? I think,
yeah.
Some of the content I did with AJ, aka Dr. Doom from Live, I think that he hits the nail on the head with that. If you want to look up the Big Esports podcast, you can see that there. And the stuff that I talked to him about is they create a platform that essentially allows people to broadcast themselves playing virtual reality games by placing them physically looking like they're inside the game as they're broadcasting. And I think his main discussion was around changing the ways that we consume content. The way that you watch a Twitch stream is really like version 1.0, and it really is just a TV turned online. And that's what Netflix is really. It's just a TV turned online. It's the same way that for the past 10 years, my dad's been recording on a DVR and then skipping ads. There's not much difference between that and between watching Netflix, where you just don't have to press the 30-second button skip for an ad. And you know, he has down pat exactly in his head how many minute and how many 30 seconds he has to skip, depending on what the show is, to skip the ads at any one period of time. So it's all about interactivity. It's all about paying for attention. It's all about becoming as entwined and as knowledgeable of the people you're watching as possible. If you think about this in another way, one awesome thing about Chris Hemsworth that used to be, or any celebrity, was that they were this mythical creature that you got to see once a year on a big screen, maybe twice if you're really lucky, or zero if you're not. And then they go off to their Hollywood mansion hills and you never hear from them again unless you read New Idea or, you know, some of these kind of magazines that follow them around as paparazzi. And that the allure of them, which is what was so awesome. But now it's the opposite. If you're an influencer, if you're like Ninja when he was on the rise, he was streaming 8 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. People want to see that. Plus they want to see a weekly recap on YouTube of what he's done. They also want to see him posting TikToks. They want to see him posting Instagram stories. They want to see him tweeting and replying to people. And all of this kind of stuff too. He needs to be as accessible as possible. So we're, say, working with a startup right now that allows an influencer to automate some of those processes, as well as to pay for attention of these influencers as well. How much would you pay to have dinner with Hugh Jackman, for example, if that was a possibility? You know, would his fans do that? It's definitely, there is potential there. So that's part of it. But also how you interact and how you watch these live streams. Liv has this awesome thing where people play this game called Beat Saber, where these little blocks come at you to the beat of the music and you're holding virtual lightsabers and you chop them with the beat of the music. It's an awesome workout. It looks great. But what they've done is now they've enabled people through, if you donate a certain amount of money, it'll actually change what the game looks like. It'll put your face or your name on there. It'll make all these awesome effects happen. And you can say, it'll say, thanks, Dan, you donated. And the other potential 30,000 people watching at any one time can be like, man, Dan is awesome. He's donated to this. I can see his name all over this screen. And you can go, yeah, this is great. I'm having an effect on what's happening. They've got another one where you can actually donate or type !bomb in the chat and it sends a bomb at them in the game that they're not supposed to hit. So imagine if you could be watching the V8 Supercars online, and it could be like Mario Kart that Eayl said before, and you could type !banana and chuck $10 behind it, and it drops a banana on the track, and one of the cars hits it and spins out. You could donate. I've seen this before. You could donate for a boost where users can actually vote, and they can say, hey, the car that's coming third, everybody watching it collectively, we actually want him to have a bit of an advantage. We're going to give him a NOS boost. So everyone's going to vote/donate to give him a NOS boost to be able to get ahead of the other competition. So it's all about how you can interact as much as possible. I saw a blockchain football, NFL football league as well, that was all based, the viewers got to choose everything. Who's going to come off and go on in the interchange? The viewers get to vote for that. What's the play going to be upcoming? The viewers are going to vote for that. You know, awesome. who's going to be the starting lineup? The viewers vote for that.
That's cool. And I suppose like bringing that back to the real world now, you can do that right now with things like Mentimeter, which is an online portal for voting things, right down to you look at all these sports teams that we spoke about earlier that come to a grinding halt because they can't actually go out and train. Well, they have time. And you can sell time with these players. So I'm sure they have commercial responsibilities that there's gaps in where they're tied to actual organizations where they can actually sell their time across channels as influencers, as like super influencers, and make themselves more accessible, whether that would be have lunch with a really famous sports person. I default back to soccer. I won't say Essendon because I know we've got Hayden on the line here, who's an Essendon player, for example, or Bomber. But there are these opportunities, and I suppose these people aren't really thinking outside their box. Now, I'm really mindful. We're going to go over 5 minutes. I've got one question I want to ask, and then I'm going to wrap up. There's a couple of questions that I've been posted, and I'm going to ask you guys independently, and I'm going to post those answers back in our article. But my big question to you guys are, as somebody, either a business, I'll ask you, Eayl, from a business perspective, both of you from a business perspective, got a marketing side and a more of an organizational side. How do you get started in the industry? How did like, I want to make that step. I've got some budget now. I want to invest. Where would you recommend, without going Thunder or big esports, but like just generally, like I'll ask you, Eayl, first.
What do you mean without? What do you mean?
Yeah, like
I'm staring. Yeah, I guess maybe if I can share some insights in regards to my journey, it's I think probably some of the similarities between other startups and entrepreneurs is the fact that you have to start from the bottom up. Fortunately and very openly speaking, we had opportunities to be invested in by VCs and things like that, and we opted against it. And the reason for that being either crazily or not crazily is because we wanted to maintain control, and we wanted to, and we understood that the fact that if we did have investment, that the brand and the nature of our value proposition would change in some way, shape, or form. So, the good thing is, especially about the Australian market in particular, as once again, esports is one subset of gaming. If you're fascinated in esports, there's a lot of local area tournaments that people can volunteer and participate in and start getting to know some of the players in that market. On the other side, on the flip side of that, in gaming, I'm proud to say that even during COVID-19, it's still quite an active recruitment market, because the good thing is a lot of the work can be done remotely, of course, in terms of coding and so on and so forth, depending on the nature of the requirement. So I guess if you're prepared to take the hard yards or take the hard knocks along the way, and it's one of those industries where you do have to start from the bottom up, in all honesty, irrespective of networking and things like that, you have to start literally from the bottom up. I think more often than not, the good thing about the Australian market is that it's quite, it embraces people. And so you'll find that there'll be a lot of great people along the way that will help.
Awesome. How about yourself, Chris?
Yeah,
I
think
share the group.
Yeah, I think Eayl explained it really well. I mean, he's the perfect person to explain that because he has come from being an outsider in the industry to an insider, and him and his co-founder Paul within that period of time. So I think, learning through his experience is the best way to do it. And a lot of what I saw both of them doing is just embedding yourself in the industry. Just ask people questions. Everyone wants to share the word. There's a common thing I've said so many times before in content is that there was a StarCraft 2 forum called SE2 SEA, which stands for Southeast Asia, back in around 2010 to 2012 time. And there was a post on that forum saying, hey, everyone, Christmas is coming up. Make sure to evangelize esports as much as you can. Maybe you've got an uncle that works at Coca-Cola, an auntie that works at KPMG, a cousin that's a high-level lawyer. Go and tell them about how awesome esports is. Go and spend some time talking to them, showing them links, showing them information and things like that too. So really just getting out there and reading some stuff. I get a lot of my news and information from LinkedIn. I get a lot of my news and information from Twitter, from a journalist called Slasher, as well as I posted a link as well to a Facebook group that I run as well, which is the Oceania Esports and Gaming Business Facebook group. We've only ever had to kick one person from that group ever. So it's a very collaborative, it's a very productive group where people are just sharing industry information, insights, and asking questions on there. I think for anyone who's running a business right now, there's 2 accountants that are going crazy writing different articles, posting in there about here's what JobKeeper means for you and your business. Here's how you can apply, and here's how things are applicable. I'm always sharing articles and information in there about, hey, here's an advancement that's happened in America that maybe we should copy paste here and things like that. So we've made sure to keep this as a group where people don't just say, hey, I'm live on Twitch, or hey, come and join this tournament. It's a very business centric and discussion based place where someone can say, can someone get me in contact with a team owner? I'd love to talk to them. Can someone recommend to me a lawyer, an accountant, or an insurer in the industry? And people will all jump in there and give their 2 cents.
That's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right, so we're going to close off. We've gone 3 minutes over, but we started 10 minutes after. So I'm just going to close off. But first up, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your time today. You're bringing your energy, your enthusiasm, sharing your insights. I'm going to copy and paste the chat as well. So I'll share that in the article, some of the links, especially around the groups. Now, earlier I asked you to copy and paste into your text editor some of these questions. So I'm going to ask you guys now, there's a few of you on the line still. If you can, I'll just look at your questions, Zach, in a moment. But if you could share what did you learn today? If you could copy and paste that into that chat panel, I'll give you a second there to do that, just so we have that all organized. That would be awesome. And whilst you do that, I'm just going to look at many of which are heavily VC. Okay, so if you didn't get much of a response to anything you learned, how about what did you love? What's that?
Can I just add something very quickly?
Go on.
Similar to be honest, Chris, you know, who I see on, you know, on a very regular basis being very collegiate with the industry. We're happy to be collegiate too. So if you know, any questions outside of this forum, I'm more than happy to be connected with and answer as well, if we don't have enough time to answer any of these, all these questions. So I just thought I should have.
Well, I'm going to add them into the Future of Now LinkedIn group, and that way you guys can continue that engagement. I'm also going to share your links in a minute. So I'm slowly adding these questions in whilst you guys are talking. I'll also share a feedback form at the end of this as well, and I'll make sure you're connecting. So just so you guys know, everybody part of this group, we're going to announce our next meetup in the coming days. We're really excited with the next speaker. I look forward to revealing that. Also, for yourselves, if you have something to share and would like the opportunity to speak, please reach out to us. And I am just about to put our details here, because, you know, this isn't just about us, like you guys, everybody that's part of this community are specialists in their field, just like Eayl and Chris. These are people that are part of my community that I really wanted to share some insights today. So I've just added the email address, and you put fond speaker as your subject line. Now, if you'd like to connect with Chris and Eayl to learn more, they've shared some of their details already. So I'm going to put their contact details in the chat box, and I'll be adding this to the article on the More Space website. So first up, we've got Chris at Big eSports. So I've popped his website in there, his LinkedIn channel, his YouTube channel, and his podcast. His podcast is now 80 episodes deep, which is serious commitment, as you can see from the tech in front of him. And here you can learn about business and gaming from the best, covering multiple areas, from content creators to eSport investors and professional gamers. And then here I've got Thunder Insurance, and a direct email through to the guys over there as well, and their website and their LinkedIn. These guys are at the forefront of what's happening from a insurance perspective and risk, and from a just from what you need to do and the types of things you need to consider as a gamer or getting into an esports world, whether you're a team, whether you're an organization, whatever. Speak to Eayl. He's an absolute body of knowledge. If you wish to connect and you're not already part of the broader community, connect with me on LinkedIn if you're not already, and add your connection, add the message Future Now. I'll add you to the group. If you wish to learn more about More Space, here's our links. If you wish to learn more about our sponsors, Mural, where there's heaps of new tools and templates, as well as spaces for the co-working space, I'm adding that there. So as I wrap up, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone being part of this meetup today. It's intentionally meant to interrupt your working day, because you're sitting on your bottoms, interrupted by Zoom meetings. So I thought it'd be nice for you to have an hour break, grab a cup of coffee, listen to some experts, listen to something different. If you have any other questions, I've got some coming through on the Q&A box. Aaron, I really appreciate your question you sent through on the Facebook group for Melbourne startups. I'm going to post it to the guys. They are going to respond to it. So I promise you, you will get a response in the linked up group, the LinkedIn group, as well, I'm sure the Facebook group, which you'll join. I wish everybody a lovely evening, day, morning, whatever time you are. Stay well, stay safe, stay sane of mind. Don't check the news too much. Look after each other. And thank you so much, guys. You want to wave and give everyone a big bit of love for the day. Take care of yourselves. Thank you, guys.
Keep safe. Cheers.
All right, so people are going to start to disappear. I'm going to stop the recording.